"You're just bitter because you failed," Darren said, loud enough for the table to fall silent. My hand tightened around the stem of my glass. I kept my eyes on my fork, the roast chicken, suddenly dry in my mouth. Across from me, Marissa smirked into her wine. My granddaughter, Zoe, swung her little legs under the table, oblivious. We were at their new place, well new to them. A 2-story in a cul-de-sac with white siding and a porch swing they never use. Darren had insisted I come for dinner to reconnect, but this wasn't a reunion. It was an ambush with appetizers. "Bitter," I said, setting down my fork. "Failed." Darren shrugged, picking at his steak. "You retired early, and now you're just there. You don't contribute. You don't understand what it takes to build a real life anymore." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Tan, thick, and heavier than it looked. I laid it on the table right beside the mashed potatoes. "You want to talk about contributions?" I asked quietly. Marissa arched a brow. "What's that? Receipts? Mortgage payments? Tax records? Bank transfers?" I opened the folder to the first page and turned it toward them. $65,000. Paid over 2 years. From me to your lender. Because you were 72 hours from foreclosure, the day Zoe turned 4. Darren stared at the page like it was in a language he'd never seen. "You said you had a little money saved," he muttered. "I did," I said. "Now I have a little less." Marissa leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "So, what, you didn't have to do that?" "No," I agreed. "I didn't." The room sat in stunned silence for a beat too long. Darren finally pushed back his chair, the legs scraping hard against the tile. "You could have told us," he snapped. I stood folding the folder closed. "You could have thanked me." I walked out before the tears came, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much colder distance I needed to keep. The next morning, I sat alone in my kitchen, pouring my coffee black. The kitchen was quiet save for the hum of the fridge and the slow drip of the coffee maker. I sat at the table alone, hands wrapped around my mug, staring at the faded placemats I hadn't changed in months. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt forgotten. 2 years. That's how long I'd been quietly propping them up. Darren had called it just a little help back then. He said it was temporary, a rough patch. 1 mortgage payment turned into 2. Then came the utilities. Then Zoe's school fees. Then the $2,300 property tax notice that showed up with a red stamp like a warning flare. I covered it all piece by piece like patching a roof in a storm. And yet I didn't get a seat at Thanksgiving. I didn't get a text on Christmas morning. They sent a group photo from Marissa's mother's house, everyone smiling, matching pajamas. Even the dog had a bow on. I stared at that photo for a long time. There wasn't an empty chair in sight, just mine. I told myself they were busy, that they'd remember me next year. But when Zoe's birthday came around and I saw the decorations on Marissa's Instagram streamers, cake balloons, a rented magician, I knew. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was the feeling of being useful, but invisible. Needed, but never acknowledged. Every transfer I made bought them another month in that house, another chance to keep up appearances. And every time I waited for a thank you that never came. Marissa once said, "We just want to do things our way." But their way was built on my bank account and my silence. I stared at the stack of envelopes on my counterbill's insurance statements, my own life slowly being buried under theirs. I stood, walked to the drawer where I kept my checkbook, and tucked it away beneath a folder labeled personal. It was time to start using that word again. The phone rang as I reached the hallway. I saw Darren's name flash on the screen. I didn't answer Darren's call. Instead, I spent the afternoon at the dining table with a stack of receipts, printouts, and check stubs. The binder I chose was black heavy and 3 inches thick. It felt fitting. Every page I slid into a sleeve was a truth I'd buried. The mortgage transfers, daycare deposits, credit card payments in Marissa's name, I lined them up one by one until the numbers no longer felt like numbers. They were months of my life. Years, even. Each time I'd told myself it was temporary, that it was family, that they'd repay me at least in gratitude. But when I stared down at the final tally, $65,000 across 2 years, I didn't feel proud. I felt used. The shaking started around page 30. My hands couldn't hold the hole punch steady, and I accidentally tore through the side of a statement. That's when I heard the knock at the screen door. Mrs. Templeton, my neighbor for 15 years, stood with a grocery bag in hand. "I brought you some pears," she said, "from that old tree behind the church. You okay, honey?" I opened my mouth to lie, but something in her eyes stopped me. Instead, I let her in. When she saw the spread across my table, she didn't ask questions. She just sat down, took one look at the totals circled in red ink, and exhaled slowly. "This isn't generosity, Corlena," she said, after a long pause. "It's theft in polite clothing." I blinked. "It's family," I said, weaker than I meant to. She leaned forward. "Family that forgets your birthday while you pay their light bill? No, sweetheart. That's not family. That's a bank without interest." Her words hit harder than I expected. I nodded, finally, sliding the last sheet into place and closing the binder. "I just wanted to help," I whispered. Mrs. Templeton reached over and squeezed my wrist. "Then help yourself next." That night, I placed the binder in my lockbox and turned the key with more certainty than I'd felt in months. 2 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived from Marissa, addressed to Zoe, but written in her handwriting. The envelope from Marissa had been nothing more than a birthday invitation for Zoe cupcakes and crafts at their house next Saturday. No mention of me helping pay the mortgage that kept their roof intact. Just a handwritten line at the bottom. "If you can swing by with some snacks, that'd be great." "No, please. No, thank you." I set it aside and returned to sorting my documents. I'd decided it was time to get my own affairs in order. Review my credit check on my modest retirement fund, make sure nothing was slipping through the cracks. But something was. Tucked between 2 old insurance statements was a loan document, one I didn't remember signing. The logo read, Austin Community Credit Union, a $12,000 personal loan issued 9 months ago. My name, my social security number, my address, my signature. Only it wasn't mine. I stared at the shaky loop in the sea of my name. It looked close enough to fool a clerk, but I knew my own handwriting. This wasn't it. My chest tightened. I didn't panic. I scanned the page, then picked up my phone. 3 rings later, Janet answered. She used to work with me at the school district's finance office before retiring last year. I explained everything and sent her a scanned copy. 10 minutes later, she called back. "That's not your signature, Corlena. And the routing number on the payout. It went to Darren's account." The silence between us said more than either of us could manage. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still for a long time. He had done this. My son. The boy I raised alone after his father left. The boy I used to drive to early band practice, wait in the car while he played trumpet off key. The boy who once held my hand when I had surgery. He hadn't just borrowed money. He'd borrowed me, my name, my credit, my trust. I pulled the binder from the lockbox and slid the forged loan into the back. There was no more room for denial. I walked into the credit union with my shoulders squared and my binder tucked under my arm like armor. The clerk recognized me. "Hi, Ms. Ellery," she said, like I was just another regular checking on my balance, not the woman whose son had forged her name for 12 grand. "I need to freeze all accounts under my name," I said, sliding the loan copy across the counter. "And I want to place a fraud alert." Her face changed as soon as she saw the paperwork. She called in the manager. He asked questions, all polite. I answered them with steady words, but inside, my ribs felt hollow. The forgery wasn't just a mistake, it was a plan. Darren had counted on me staying quiet. He always had. By the time I left, all my accounts were locked and a fraud investigation had begun. I walked back to my car, sat with the door open, and let the dry Texas wind hit my face. Back home, I made coffee strong, bitter, no sugar. I needed to think. While sipping, I opened Facebook. I don't even know why habit, maybe, but there it was, staring back at me like a slap. A photo Marissa had tagged Darren in weeks ago. They were on a balcony ocean behind them. Her drink was rimmed in salt. His shirt was unbuttoned, tan lines already forming. Maui Magic, the caption read, with a lei emoji and 3 hearts. The date made my mouth go dry. That weekend, I'd skipped my dentist appointment because the property tax bill had come in late. Darren said it was urgent that the county would add penalties if I didn't wire it by Monday. I'd sent the money without asking questions. They were on a beach. I was in my kitchen swishing salt water to soothe a cracked tooth. I scrolled further. More photos. A zipline video. Matching massage robes. I clicked save on each one and printed them out. I added them to the binder under a new tab, disrespect. I didn't say a word when I arrived. I simply walked into Darren's house, nodded hello to the grandkids, and sat at the dining table, same place I'd sat during the last ambush they called a family dinner. This time, I didn't come empty-handed. I placed the binder on the center of the table. Thick. Black. Weighted with 2 years of truth. Darren gave me a half smile. You're early, Mom. I won't stay long, I said. I just came to return something. Marissa floated in from the kitchen, already annoyed. Is this about the utilities again? Because the water bill came late. No, I said calmly. This is about everything. I opened the binder and turned it toward them. The first page was the mortgage breakdown, every monthly payment, highlighted in yellow. Darren's fingers twitched, but he stayed quiet. The next section, daycare tuition, grocery transfers, late-night Venmo requests, labeled emergency. Page after page. Spa receipts, streaming subscriptions, 3 different grocery delivery services, all billed to me. Marissa leaned forward, her expression tight. What is this? My bank statements, I said. Your spa membership in May 179. The organic grocery delivery 223.48. Weekly. Darren's eyes darted across the page. Mom, you offered to help? No, I cut in. I offered once. You turned it into a system, a silent one where I pay and pretend not to notice you treating me like a burden while spending my money on foot peels and wine deliveries. Marissa's mouth opened, then closed again. Darren tried to soften his voice. We're family, Mom. Why would you do this here? Because I've been erased here, I said. In birthdays, in Christmas photos, in invitations, but never in billing. I turned to the last tab, labeled vacation, then flipped it open to the printed photos of their Maui trip. You asked for help with taxes that week, I said. I skipped my own care for you, while you sipped cocktails on my dime. The silence was sharp. I stood. I won't be paying another cent. And as I walked toward the door, Darren's voice followed Mom. Wait. The next morning, I logged into every portal I'd once used to pay on their behalf. Mortgage, daycare, utilities, groceries. I clicked through each one slowly, deliberately, and removed my card information. No more autopay. No more silent giving. It felt strange at first, like letting go of a railing I didn't realize I'd been clutching for years. But the quiet afterward, it wasn't guilt. It was relief. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear a word from Darren or Marissa. Not even a passive-aggressive text. Then on a Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, Darren snapped, "We just got a delinquency notice from the bank." What the hell happened? I didn't flinch. The payments stopped. You were supposed to cover it until next month. You knew we were still catching up. No, I said evenly. You assumed. And assumptions aren't agreements. He went quiet, then lowered his voice like he was talking to a child. You're seriously going to let us lose the house? After all we've done? All you've done? I laughed. Darren, I've paid $65,000 to keep your name off foreclosure records. And you still had the nerve to call me useless at that table. That was just frustration, he muttered. You took it too seriously. No, I replied. You meant it, and I finally believed you. There was silence on the line. Then, you're betraying the family mom. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and said the words I'd been holding in for years. No, Darren. You did that when you called me nothing, when you erased me everywhere but the bank. He hung up. It was a Sunday afternoon when Zoe knocked on my door, her little backpack slung over one shoulder and a drawing clutched in her hand. I made this for you, she said, holding up a picture of us in front of a house with big windows and coffee mugs. Why don't you come over anymore? I felt my throat tighten. She walked in like she always used to, plopping down on the couch and taking off her shoes. Her small voice filled the quiet like sunlight slipping through curtains. Daddy said you're mad about something silly. I sat beside her, tucking her hair behind one ear. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, Zoe. And when they don't say sorry, we have to decide what kind of love we deserve. She blinked at me, confused, but listening. Did I do something bad? That's when the tears came. I turned my face away, but she still saw. No, baby, I whispered. You did nothing wrong. We made cocoa and played cards. She showed me her new reading book, and I listened to her sound out every word. I didn't bring up Darren. I didn't bring up the house or the envelope I still hadn't opened. But I knew something then. This wasn't just about debt or dignity. This was about her, about showing her that love shouldn't come with strings or silence. If I kept accepting crumbs, she'd think that was normal. If I stayed where I wasn't respected, she'd think that's what family meant. So I let her stay a little longer. Let her laugh and draw and be held. And when Darren finally texted hours later, "Is she with you?" Bring her back. I didn't rush. I walked Zoe home slowly, holding her hand the whole way. At the door, she hugged me hard. Can I come next weekend? I smiled. Anytime you want, sweetheart. My door's always open for you. Inside, Marissa didn't say a word. Darren just looked tired, but I'd already decided. I wasn't stepping back into that house. Not again. Not ever. I saw her before she saw me. Marissa near the frozen vegetables, one hand on her hip, the other scrolling her phone. Her cart was half full, but her eyes were sharper than usual. She spotted me by the canned goods and walked over. Voice syrupy, sweet, but tight around the edges. Running into you here is perfect, she said, forcing a smile. Darren's been really stressed. You know, with everything going on. Maybe this isn't the time to let pride get in the way of family. I didn't flinch. Just reached into my bag and handed her a small, sealed envelope. What's this? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Something I think you should have, I said calmly. You can use it for court. Or your conscience. She opened it right there, her expression changing as she read the notarized document. It was a copy of the loan Darren had forged in my name, now officially recorded. I'd had it notarized the week prior, with a quiet visit to a legal friend who owed me a favor. Marissa's face paled, her mouth slightly open. You wouldn't? I haven't, I said, but I could. That depends on whether the harassment stops, and whether Zoe stays out of this mess. I walked away without waiting for a response. Back home, I brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat out on the patio. The late light turned the yard gold, the breeze lifting the edge of the curtain. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating who needed what or when a bill was due. I just sat, quiet, steady, free. My phone buzzed once, then stopped. No voicemail, no apology. Just the tension of someone realizing I wouldn't be pushed anymore. The binder still sat on the kitchen counter, closed now, complete. My story in receipts and statements. As the sun dropped behind the trees, I took one long sip and let the silence hold me. Not out of fear, but power. The next morning, I opened a new folder, this one labeled Future. It's been 5 months since that grocery store encounter. The walls of my living room are no longer the pale beige Darren once insisted looked neutral and respectable. I painted them sunflower yellow last weekend. It took 2 coats and a little bit of swearing, but I did it myself. Every inch. No approval needed. The credit card is paid off. The last of the lingering medical bill from 3 years ago gone. I cashed in the travel points I'd been hoarding all those years for emergencies that were never mine and booked a solo trip to Maine. A small inn by the coast, a room with a view of the sea, and a shelf full of books I've never read. There are no more automatic withdrawals, no quiet obligations. Each morning, I make coffee strong enough to wake my bones, and I sit at the small table by the window journal, open pen in hand. I've started tracking something new: joy. Not income or outflow, not guilt or giving, just joy. A walk without my phone, a letter from Zoe with crayon hearts around my name, the laugh I couldn't hold back when Diane texted me that her cat had learned to open the freezer. The binder still lives in the cabinet, but I haven't opened it in weeks. The final tab reads, Freedom, and the last page is blank. Not because there's nothing left to write, but because that page is reserved now. Reserved for what I choose to give if I ever feel moved to again. Not what's taken. Not what's expected. Only what's earned. Sierra called last week. Not to ask for anything, just to say she missed me. I told her I was heading out of town soon, and maybe we could talk after. She said she'd wait. There's peace in knowing the door is open, but the key is mine. This morning, I packed a small suitcase and tucked a notebook beside my sunglasses. No plans beyond quiet days, the ocean, and maybe fresh berries from a roadside stand. And the joy I'll tally one sunrise at a time.